Good day and welcome once again back to B2B Next. And we are here with Titanium sponsor IBM. And we are here to talk about an issue that is top of mind across supply chain, procurement, order management, and B2B e-commerce. And there has been a sea change in just the last several months to B2B commerce, and that impacts all the way back to the supply chain. Early on in the COVID crisis, many companies were confronted with not just a supply chain issue, they were severe supply chain disruption issues. And those went all the way from transparency all the way into front-end e-commerce order management types of issues. So we're going to unfurl that just a little bit here, kind of take a look at why the problems began. More importantly, what technology solutions that IBM can recommend that will do faster, better, more efficient order management in the new age of digital supply chain. And to do that, we are excited to welcome our guest, Sudhir Balebail, who is the Program Director, Order Management from IBM. So welcome to our interview, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Bob, for having me.
There has been a lot of change happening in a very short period of time to both order management and supply chain. Could you kind of paint the big picture for us? What happened and why did that happen? To kind of set the stage first.
I think this year was a year like nothing else we've ever seen, right? I won't be wrong in saying that. I think what we saw was changes both in the supply chain and in the demand chain, and both happening at the same time. It was a double whammy of sorts for a lot of folks who were in the, who had a major, footprint in supply chain. I think what that brought about for folks was systems that were, good for one kind of business situation don't necessarily translate well into another kind of business situation if there is a dramatic change in the landscape itself. So people started realizing that systems that could change with the time was very important. They also realized that data and data management is significant. And one of the things that we saw was traditional B2B really stepping up and realizing that they needed to very quickly get into like a B2B to C kind of concept. So the pace at which they may have already had plans to do some of this, but this year kind of changed it all, and it accelerated those plans significantly for a lot of folks in this industry.
We're talking to a lot of people about order management and supply chain issues in our coverage of the marketplace, if you will. But can you talk about some of the specific challenges that companies that are confronting order management and supply chain these days? And the reason I ask is this, because we had a very informative Q&A with one of your IBM colleagues about these types of overall supply chain issues. And a main point they made to me that still resonates today is the fact that now these projects aren't just going online in 18 months to 2 years. They're being shrunk down to maybe just several months, but that leads to many challenges. What are those, and how do you recommend that they be solved? What are these companies looking at?
I'll kind of do it as I'll start off from the way businesses have been operating first, and then I'll kind of get down into the more detail about the projects itself. Using traditional ERPs or homegrown systems to manage their order and inventory has been very, I would say, time-consuming, very people-oriented, very process-oriented. And we had an example. One of our customers, Finning, told us before they had kind of gone into their discovery of our systems and so on, that they were going through like a 2-inch stack of paper orders and faxes from the prior day. And that was how they were fulfilling their orders and their fulfillment activities. They were coming from a place where it was all disparate data systems, all siloed implementations, many of them which were started at different points in time in the company. For them, the bigger challenge was how to bring it all together, how to give customers a unique experience, navigating or interacting with each of these channels, and operating in a very unified manner. One of our customers, Parker Hannifin, had as much as 101 divisions in their company, each individual group that handles each product line, product category, and so on. Bringing it all together, I think it was around 50 countries, bringing it all together across those 50 countries and making sure that the customers didn't see each of the individual departments. They saw a unified face of Parker Hannifin in this case, right? We've seen a very similar example from another customer of ours, General Motors, for their after market parts, the supply organization, where they kind of distribute the product to franchisee businesses like your local car garage or the place where you go for your car repair and so on. Those were their customers, and they were the ones who would sell to end customers. Those companies, right, which were in a B2B to C kind of model, they also saw that need to accelerate their systems, and a siloed way of working just wouldn't cut it, not just in this year, in any year. This year was just something that accelerated the pace at which those could happen.
And what are some of the timelines that you and IBM are seeing here? I mean, are we still talking years? Are we talking months? And then what role does order management play within this time frame? Does it drive the process, or it's the whole supply chain, and in the process, order management becomes more efficient as part of the process? So does one drive the other, and what kind of time frames do you think we're looking at here? Have you
I
seen?
would say this, right? Order management is a great mimic, right? And it has to be. We call it like the quarterback in the fulfillment chain. There are certain systems that are already there, that are already doing what they do well, right? Order management always comes in, and it fills in the gaps. People have called it like the universal glue that brings different systems together. So for those systems that want to continue to work the way they were before, right? Let's take example SAP ERP, a great system, does a phenomenal job, managing order processing, managing inventory management, and so on. What we do is we work and we augment those systems, and we cover up the gaps or the seams between those systems and, let's say, an e-commerce system or a marketplace that you have to integrate to, and so on. Our customers, we try to make sure that they see virtually immediate results with the solution. So the way our solution is implemented itself, in as little as 2 weeks, we would be able to show like an MVP implementation of our product. It could be either an inventory visibility exercise or order visibility exercise on top of their current systems and so on. And then our lab teams, we call them expert labs within our group, they would come in and do like an accelerated implementation with a proof of technology. It could be as less as 2 weeks. It could be as much as like six to 8 months, depending on how deep a customer wants to go in, and the number of systems you integrate into and so on.
And let's get hands-on here if we could. So how does one, let's drill down on this. How does IBM suggest that those who are either looking to IBM or putting in place the better order management we're talking about here, what augments what? What drives what? What do you recommend that companies evaluate, take stock of, and how they proceed from there?
I'll back it up a little bit. I'll start with what B2B companies should do when they want to get started, right? Have a good vision, know what your company needs from a business strategy perspective. Have a very good sense of execution in terms of setting your resources, budgets, time frames to implement your new technologies and practices. And have some flexibility in terms of watching what your competitors are doing, what your customers are asking for, and build in agility into your processes so that you're able to pivot and adapt to changing models and so on. Once you've got those big rocks in the right place, you can very quickly do these following steps to kind of augment what you're doing and evaluating your current situation and moving to where you want to be. First things, reach into your peer network. The social world has significantly transformed these past years, and there's more openness about sharing success stories, best practices, watch outs and advisories. If you go into any like online channels like G2 reviews, your websites in some cases and so on, there's a lot of good stories that are curated that kind of tell what makes a good project and what makes a bad project in some cases. Trusted advisors, talk to analysts, system integrators. I'm probably looking at one right here, and who have extensive experience about best practices in B2B. These are the folks who can really guide you about, who might have a good sense of where you are, what is your process maturity and so on, and then take you to the right place in terms of giving the right advice. IBM ourselves, we've invested a lot in what we call BVAs, Business Value Assessment Offers, where prior to making a software selection, a team of experts are able to come in and uncover benefits that your team may not have considered. There is a base ROI case that's to be done for what is your cost savings, but many times there's a top line savings also that you get by making your system that much better and exposing it to marketplaces and online portals and so on.
And I think we have a graphic that kind of drives that home, do we not? That we can show,
we do. Let me
show
try
the
to
audience?
take over control. Let me show you how we augment an ERP system. This is something that one of our folks had just kind of put together as a as a good example of how we coexist. If you look at what you have in the bottom row here, right, this is what ERPs do well. They have a, like SAP for example has their SD module that they have for the sales and distribution purposes, right? It's a very within the four walls of the ERP kind of model that they have behind that solution. It does order create, it does an order change or cancel in case there's been EDI updates or call center updates that come in, and then there's a delivery function, and then delivery is expected to go smoothly, and then it ends up in an invoicing kind of process, right? This is what ERPs do well, right? And this is what is contained within the four walls. But for the real world, you got to step out of that, just those four walls of the business. You do have a system where you have to integrate with the payment system. Many a times you have to pass your order through a fraud check system and so on. You need to do some degree of sourcing and scheduling, picking the right place to source the order from. And it's not always the place where the product is. Sometimes it's a combination of the cost that would take to fulfill the product from that location, the labor that's available to you there, the opportunity cost, and so on. And then you release the order to the right system. Sometimes it's released to a warehouse or a DC. Sometimes it's released to a store and you do store fulfillment. This is a piece where OMS has been wildly successful in helping people use their stores in lieu of their actually having a DC. Companies which are West Coast based who had plans to open an East Coast warehouse would have chosen not to do that because they feel that they can address the demand just from the stores that they have in that region and so on. And then finally, once the pick, pack, ship process is complete, we settle with a credit card and we're able to complete the invoice process. A further variation of this could be something like drop ship, right? Where in the sourcing and scheduling process, you're not sending it to a store or DC owned by you. You're sending it off to a supplier and the supplier ships the product directly to the customer. This is the kind of complexity that, it's better we bring these elements in. There's a lot the B2B world can learn from the B2C world as well. And a lot of practitioners I have seen have already kind of transposed their knowledge of the B2C world into the B2B world as well. And our system has a very beautiful construct that we call the participant model, where we built a solution not based on a shopper ID or an email address, for instance. We've really taken it down to a concept of a buyer, a seller, a shipper, and so on. And we bring it all together to make sure that B2B processes also are executed with the same rigor that you would expect from a very complex retail scenario as well.
And our final question is, I'd like to kind of bring this whole focus back to order management, which is as we go through this sea change that is currently undergoing all aspects of supply chain and B2B e-commerce, what is the immediate future do you see for order management changing the most, and what role will IBM play with that, do you think? Let's kind of drive it home and kind of sum to our audience that way. What's ahead for order management, and what role does IBM play in it, do you think?
I think more and more of companies are realizing that trying to make their ERP system do something that does not come naturally to it is a losing proposition. They really need an order orchestration solution to kind of help improve both their customer satisfaction, reduce their costs, and start contributing to top line. That's something that I really see customers kind of waking up to that reality in the short term itself, and looking for options where they can get that kind of advice in terms of how they make that movement and so on. That's like a very immediate tactical thing. There is one term that I've seen come up in the I've seen it more in the manufacturing and the aftermarket parts kind of industry, which they call as servigistics. That's the kind of model that I'm seeing creeping over into other parts of the business as well, where you tie in not just your manufacturing aspects, but also the service elements aligned with that. Companies are finding ways of adding value to their customers by merging in those elements of service into their product and the product shipments and so on. And as they reach out to their peer customers to see what's happening in the industry, I think it would be great if they could keep IBM in their plans as well. Like I said before, we have a very good onboarding path for these customers to kind of learn what are the options available to them, both with our expert labs team and with our GBS practice. We have quite a few experts who can help guide a customer through that discovery and learning process, and get to a sense of ROI around how these solutions can help them. So I feel that's the best place to start for the customers who want to kind of move on to the next level, if you may, in their class.
I'd like to thank you so much and our audience so much for taking some time today, because sea change is on the way. Supply chains will be transformed, but order management is going to be a key driver of that. And the change is coming now, so it comes down to a technology focus. So with that in mind, we thank our Titanium sponsor, IBM, and our guest for his time and help today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.